You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency?
Hey everybody, this is Lance with Monster 911. Glad to be with you again, and it's so good that you are tuning in. Today's show is going to be very, very interesting. Initially, I hesitated to want this to be a show, but had I been the Lance of, say, 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have. But after my experiences with interviews and now probably about 2,000 interviews, and my experience in dealing with these dark agents, if you will, or other government agencies, I wanted to do this show. It's very important. And I'll just say that if you've had any experiences with, say, any UFOs, creatures on 2 or 4 legs that you would like to share, I would really like to hear it. I'm documenting this, and I'm just helping a lot of people cope with this. I'm usually not the one and done kind of guy. I'd like to know how you've been, or how are things going since the interview, since you've seen this, and what others that have seen what you've seen, what is their take of this and the context of everything. So if you've seen something, again, creature related, UFO related, or anything of the paranormal, give me a call at 1-866-306-8085. Again, that's 866-306-8085. Or you can go to monster911.com, go up into the menu bar, and I believe if you go over to the right side, it's the menu bar has something called Contact. Click on that, and you can tell me what occurred. It will leave an email to me, okay? This show is not for everybody. Definitely there's some parental discretion is advised. I'll just say that. So please don't let the kids hear this show. And even for you, some of you adults here. Many of you know that I'm a Christian. I believe in the Lord. I do believe that there's a biblical aspect associated with these Nephilim. Even if they don't really fit the characteristic of a Sasquatch or a Dogman, I believe that all these type of cryptids are related to the Nephilim. So that's my perspective. That may not be your perspective, but that's okay. But with that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit, bring someone in that's more or less an expert on this. And also because of many of you, whether you're just getting started into investigative work, or you've been at it a while, or you're somewhat very seasoned investigator going out into the woods by yourself, or just a couple of you, it's important to hear this show because we talk about safety, having a firearm and things like that because of things you might encounter, and really it's not so much cryptid related. That's actually going to be few and far between, and in my opinion the percentages are very, very low that you're going to need a firearm or some means of protection against a cryptid going out. It's either going to be indigenous wildlife or man. So, but with all that being said, there are things that are going and have been ongoing for decades or a millennia in the woods, and people conducting rituals that you need to hear about. I've not heard of any shows in this cryptid community yet talking about this, but it's very, very important because number one, it's real. Unfortunately, it is real. Number two, it's pretty scary, which gets back into number one, but it's real. And I think it does tie in to the cryptid community, and it's very poignant with today's, if you hear that sound, it's raining right now. It's very on point with today's environment, politically, with this mess internationally that we have countries that don't care for us. Everybody's on high alert, on a nuclear high alert. We're facing economy issues, and I think really at the nuts and bolts of it, regardless of what political affiliation you are, my point is this: it's about good and evil. It's about good and evil. And I'm not necessarily pointing my finger at one particular party or another. That's the thing. It is about good and evil, whether you, and that's just my personal instinct, that spirit tells me that that's what this is really involving, involving is this good and evil. And so with all that being said, I wanted to bring on someone that was quite an expert in this. And so this will be kind of like an interview, but yet I wanted to get him on. I interviewed him some time ago, and but unfortunately his show, I'll try to go back. I had some shows that got dropped, or I couldn't find them. And I didn't want to initially say, oh, it was because this dark agency erased it, but I haven't been able to find the initial interview I did with him. So I'm very thankful he called back. We spoke a bit, and I said, I've got to get him back on. Now, some of the things you're going to hear are going to be quite uncomfortable, very graphic, and we still didn't get into some of the graphic parts that he intentionally left out. And I'm glad. We don't need to know all the graphic parts. But it is graphic enough that you need to have the kids leave the room if you're listening. If you're someone with a weak stomach, or it just sets you uneasy, then just don't watch the show dealing with satanic abuse. Now you think initially, well, wait a minute, Lance, how does that relate to cryptids? How does that relate to cryptids? Well, because if you're out investigating, you might come across some ritual grounds that you need to be aware of. You need to know this stuff is real. There are rituals that people will try to conjure up these cryptids, believe it or not. And so we do go quite a bit here and there in this interview you're about to hear. But it's important because in many ways it all ties in. It all ties in. So a little bit different show. I hope you guys will stay tuned to it, listen in. It's kind of lengthy. I am going to call him back. We're going to do a part 2 on a lot of the encounters. This gentleman is a veteran. He has quite an extensive array of law enforcement skills, protecting high-level people, and later became a minister. So his background is quite extensive, quite interesting, and I think you'll find it interesting too. So let's go now to that interview that I did, and stay tuned. I hope you learn, and I think your eyes will be open quite a bit. Let's go there now.
I started my career out the 1st Marine Division, United States Marine Corps, 29 Palms, California. I was a close combat instructor for the 1st MAR Div, based out of 29 Palms. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to work for the Virginia Department of Correction, and I spent my first 3 years in the acute psychiatric unit for criminally insane, I guess you would call it. Kind of like the cell block you see in Silence of the Lambs, kind of like that.
Okay.
So that was my first 3 years in the department. After that, I transferred to a Supermax for the next 5 years, at which point I got onto the narcotics canine unit and the fugitive recovery unit. So I had a narcotics dog and a bloodhound for search and rescue and fugitive recovery. Got into teaching at the academy. So I was an instructor for firearms, prison emergency response team, chemical agents, basically anything had to do with the law enforcement community. I was an instructor for my department, or for my agency, for 8 years, for years. Hostage rescue, all those things. It was
Okay.
during that time that I became a minister, became an ordained minister in 2008. And my wife and I opened up a church here locally. And about halfway in, about 5 years into that, I had got a calling on my life in a specific area of ministry, which would be where the satanic ritual abuse comes into play.
Okay.
I met a man, a pastor out of Oklahoma. You're in Oklahoma, out of Ohio,
Okay.
named Pastor Russ Dizdar. He ran Shatter the Darkness Ministries. For 30 years, he was an expert in rescuing ritual abuse victims, housing them, getting them out, saving their life, basically. And he really kicked the stone over when it came to exposing this to the masses. So currently, Pastor Dizdar, he was assassinated last year by a coven out of Akron, Ohio. At least it is our belief. And Mr. Wong is imprisoned, and that leaves only Thomas Dunn out of Ohio, who is currently runs Through the Black Ministries. The only person left, the prominent person left in the States that is at least willing to come out and show their face that deals with this type of problem. So that's kind of how I got my start. I took Pastor Dizdar's occult crimes course. It was over 1,000 hours or so, and my wife and I started rescuing ritual abuse victims, putting them up in our home, kind of off the grid, keeping them out of the wrong people's hands, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found in that time is that through my studies is that this permeates every level of government, every social dynamic. You will find that people who are in these covens or in these organizations that deal in this are doctors or lawyers, judges, police officers, real estate developers, bankers. They are in every level of political power, local and state and federal, and have the resources to do virtually whatever they want, whenever they want.
And I think that's something very hard, what you said. First off, I agree. I think that's hard for people to swallow because it's so far out of the realm of their world. It's almost like a world. I always relate some things to movies. And the way I look at it, it's almost like The Matrix with Keanu Reeves. It's like everybody's living one world, but when you disconnect from the Matrix and you step back or really look into it, there's a lot more evil and just a entirely different paradigm world than what we are used to or what we hear on the daily news, what we read. And it's because of this. Now, some people watching would go, okay, how do you know this? Well, there's people like you that see this firsthand. You see this, and I don't know, and I don't know why. I don't want to get sidetracked too much here, but the one thing that was really an eye-opener to me, a big eye-opener, was the Fallon Brothers, their show, The Belly of the Beast.
Sure.
In D.C. Folks, if you haven't seen it, I think it's available on, I don't know, one of the rental movie, either Vimeo or it's on Hulu, I think. And it's called The Belly of the Beast by the Fallon Brothers, and they're Christian brothers, and they expose the satanic rituals that are currently in DC and have been in place for many, many years, and they actually have Dr. Tom Horn on there. So, but it ties
Yeah.
into exactly what you're saying. So, please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, you're perfect fine. I mean, Hollywood, and I think this is part of. Well, just think of Hollywood for a second. Just take that, just the term. The term Hollywood. See, in witch covens, their wands are made from the wood from the holly tree. Did you know that?
No.
Yes, real witchcraft, real witch covens, and participates, witches, warlocks, wizards, whatever term you want to put on it.
Mm-hmm.
Their wands, their staffs are made from the wood of a holly tree. That is fascinating when you think Hollywood. What they do, they cast spells, right?
They do.
They cast spells on the masses. So it's kind of fitting.
It is. I didn't know that.
But yes, that was a big red pill, so to speak. For me, early on, when you start seeing the propaganda of Hollywood and how long that's been perpetrated on the people. But I do believe that they have to do, just like Lucifer does, a form of soft disclosure, where they have to put it out there that you're actually being a spell being cast upon you. And when you accept it, you become a willing participant in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, willing or unknowing or knowing.
Knowing or unknowing. That's right.
That's the way. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, that's the scary part.
And then when you do have people in Hollywood that have the intestinal fortitude to come out and try to expose it, they end up one of three ways. They either end up silenced, censored, or 6 feet under. Unfortunately, that happens. The latter happens more often than not.
And I guess and that's the part that people, I guess, again, this was all, and I try to step back and look at this myself. How did I feel? When I first heard about this, my instant inclination, my thoughts were, disbelief. This can't be real. This can't,
of course.
I actually use those words, this can't. And the reason why is I'm always imposing myself bias that, wait a minute, it can't, because if it was real, which is very much in the analogy of these creatures, is that if it was real, the news would be all over this every day. But when people are embedded in the very fabric of what we're talking about, it's actually silenced. And the more that I started digging into this more and more, I realized that I had to sit back and just sit in my chair for a second and just absorb this, that this has been going on and this is real, and this goes on daily on radio and television and and covertly with these rituals you were talking about at a local level too. And
very much so. At a local level, it really infiltrates every level of life. There is no U.S. city with a significant population, and that goes all the way down to small college towns, even local hick towns, where this is not the case. I mean, if you want to know why the media silences it or censors it, just look at the Epstein flight logs, and it'll tell you everything you need to know on why it's silenced.
Well, those lists are not even out who was there. I don't. That's it. They went bye-bye, wherever those are.
Well,
and
they had came out for a while, and then they got silenced. But there was flight manifests publicly available for consumption that showed some of the people who, and I have copies of them, who were on that plane, so to speak, and made trips to that particular island, which, if you look at some of the old imagery, Google images of that island, which was completely revamped of late, so to speak, it was a temple. It was a satanic temple built on that island. So it tells you everything you need to know.
Wow. Scary stuff.
And being in my current job, I own an executive protection company. So I have protected in my career over the past at least 3 years, former presidents, their children, multiple governors, multiple senators, CEOs of very powerful companies, and meeting these people in person. Hell, you can smell the evil on them. I mean, it's ridiculous. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that kind of brings me up to where I'm at now. Some of my background.
Okay. It's quite extensive. That's quite extensive.
It's been pretty extensive.
Now, real quick here, before we get into, you said that not many people, podcast, want to talk about this or have an inclination to this. Is that correct?
That is my belief. I mean, it's kind of the third rail.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to ask you, and I concur with you, by the way. I totally concur with you. And I think, and I'll give my opinion why, and then you give your opinion, then we can get right into it here. I don't mean to lose your train of thought there, but I think it's just sometimes, like some people with these shows, it's a little bit uncomfortable to talk about because, again, getting what I was saying, people don't want to discuss this matter. Even in churches, don't want to talk about the devil or evil or satanic worship. And I just think that it's scary to people, and they don't.
Not only is the material, the subject matter scary, the thoughts of if it's true, what could happen to them is scary.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, is the reason why nobody wants to touch it. And if they do touch it, it's always a cursory overview of it, and it can't be true. Like the satanic panic, they called it back in the 80s. I'm sure you're familiar with that term.
I've heard it once, but I honestly, I didn't know what it was referring to.
Well, it's referring to this subject matter.
Yeah, now that makes sense.
This thing kind of got loose back in the 80s when it was first starting to be exposed by some FBI personnel. One of them's name was Tom Wedge, who wrote a book called The Satan Hunter.
Tom Wedge, Satan Hunter, okay.
You can still find it on Amazon, I believe. But most literature that's covering this subject, and I'll give you a list of some literature that's still available where you can learn some more about it. Most of it is either buried under your Google search bar to where it takes you some extensive digging to find it, or just outright banned some of the books. Or they make them so astronomically expensive that the common person can't buy them. Some of the books that are the best subject matter or best learning materials are thousands of dollars. You will find that to be the case almost in each and every case.
And the reason why we want to learn about this is because it is real, it surrounds us, and it's just and we see it happening before us right now with so many things internationally, domestically happening, and even at local levels. And I think that's the reason why we need to understand. And it does have a tie-in to these cryptids, these Nephilims. It's all anchored and tied in.
Of course, it all comes from the same source. And another reason a lot of people don't like talk about the Nephilim connection with the cryptids is because if that's true, let's just say we both know it's true.
Right.
But let's just say from them looking in, if that's true, then the whole Bible is true. And if the whole Bible is true, that unravels at least hundreds of years of pseudoscience and hidden history.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the discussions that we've had.
And the church itself is involved in it.
Yeah.
The church itself, and this is one of the saddest parts of all my research and all my experience over the past years is that the church, and I'm not speaking about local isolated pockets. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Church,
Mm-hmm.
what I call Christian dome, the big umbrella, the big 501c3 church.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is, they are complicit in this. Not only they're either turned a blind eye to it, or in some cases, some of these predominant preachers that I could name, and I will name them off air for you, are in it. They participate actively in it. And you would know them if I spoke them.
Yeah, you tell me off air and we'll talk about
But
that.
I like to, I ain't crazy. I still like to stay above dirt so I can still do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know.
And again, this is a part that it's going to be uncomfortable to people because they've got their favorite shows and everything. But, you know, to me, a lot of things, what I started learning, getting into, and again, it ties in. It's like a big spider web that ties everything in. It was not only uncomfortable, but it was very surreal and very disheartening to know that there are organizations that you thought were this way or that way, and it's nothing in realistically. When the reality comes, there's just these esoteric groups that control other major groups that behind the scenes, it's not what you think. It's a lot worse. I'll put it that way.
Yep. It is a lot worse than anybody wants to admit that it is.
Or admit or understand, even if because some people, you can tell them, you can show them, but there's still a part of them that doesn't want to believe. I know what you're telling me and I see it, but I still don't want it.
Well,
I don't want it, and
case in point, what if I told you that there was a massive corporation, worldwide global corporation, that has TV commercials, advertisements, and what if I told you they were selling a product last year selling a particular product for $10,000, something that you might be able to go down to IKEA and buy for $50. What if I told you they were selling that product online for $10,000 and that the SKU number matched perfectly with Russia's version of the Center for Missing and Exploited Children? Would you believe that if I told you? That is indeed the case.
Well, I would, coming from you being an extensive source on all things unknown, just your background and what you know and what you've done and the research and who you studied with. And with the times.
And I'm just giving you short examples. It's such a conspiracy. It's such a global network that people can't wrap their head around it. You really can't. When I look at pictures or get letters in the mail, not me personally, but pastor friends of mine, get letters in the mail with blood-soaked blankets from infants that have been sacrificed in their name. It puts another shine on things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And and from where I live,
listen to this.
From where I live,
if you decide to air this and people listen to this, they might think I'm crazy. But
and
rest assured, I am not crazy.
No, I know you're not crazy. And the thing of it is that I wanted to talk to you on this because I feel that what is occurring now, my wife and I, we pay attention to international news on a daily basis and twice a day sometimes. And sometimes I do have to take a break from it. It's easy for me in the way I look at it and for all of us, we live out in the country and it's easy. I can shut all the electronic things down and I can be in my own little world and not worry about anything. And I can just hear the bird sound and the wind going through the trees and all that. But that doesn't make things disappear. It just gives a moment of euphoria for me in my little world. And the more that I started digging into what's occurring internationally, what our government does and has been doing, and not just what's happening with other countries right now, us not getting along and all this missile crisis issue and nuclear issue and talks and invasion and all this happening and inflation economy. But what's been going on for years behind the scenes is so pervasive, so perverted, so evil that it is beyond my comprehension until I started looking a little bit more into it. And I started looking into it not directly, but indirectly, going through the creature cryptid side and looking into the public term, we call deep state, or the citizen, the deep state, which was apparently a conspiracy some years ago. Oh, there's no deep state. I even had family members say there's no deep state. And I have some family members that work for one of the alphabet groups. I'll just say that. And there's no deep state. Well, now we know that there's a deep state. We just don't know who they are, but they represent a lot of different agencies, as well as the majority of the deep state. And I'll just say the proper term for that is the unacknowledged special access programs that incorporate more of the corporate America. Corporations occupy most of these unacknowledged special access programs than the government itself. But they're all in bed with each other. And so in going the cryptid route and looking into this, then I started coming across these organizations that did these rituals. That did these satanic rituals. I mean, there's just no other word besides satanic.
Well, they do them right in front of your face. When the Speaker of the House stands up with her whole squad in white and tears the State of the Union address up in front of the world to see, that is a satanic ritual, or a portion of one. Did you know that?
I did not.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This stuff goes, like I said, when I say it goes to the top, it goes to the tippy top. I mean, the deep state has been around since Genesis. The darkness was upon the face of the deep. And if you break those terms down, it actually translates to deep state. The state of mind. I mean, it goes way, way back. These people, see, high-level occultists know this stuff. It's just us, the normies out here, the modern-day slaves to the system, that don't know it. That's why they have these secret societies, and they have these organizations, the mystery schools. I mean, Apostle Paul talked about it, Mystery Babylon. That word means in the Greek, secret initiation into religious rites. So this has been around a long time, brother.
Yeah, I'm starting to realize that it's been around a long time, eons, and
right.
So have
genetic manipulation. I mean, think about genetic manipulation. What we know in the public, or what the public knows, is 50 years to 100 years behind what the actuality is. I mean, you and I have some mutual acquaintances that you don't know we have, but I'll share with you off the air.
Okay.
That were involved at the government at a high level, and could tell you that, hell, back in the 80s, they had laptop computers before they were even marketable 20 years later to the general public. And I have employees right now that work for me as a little side deal, that work for government agencies contractually.
Okay.
and we've been doing genetic manipulation, genetic engineering, let's just say it like that, for the past 50, 60 years, and have been extremely successful at it. So when you have, researchers out there that believe that, at least on the cryptid side of things, that there's a possibility these things are manufactured, it's more than a possibility. It is a probability. You're just getting to how much is naturally occurring and how much of it is being manufactured. So I think it's probably a combination of both.
Interesting.
When the fallen angels came down and mated with the daughters of men, that's genetic manipulation. That is messing with the human genome, where we get the mighty men of renown, the mighty men of valor. You get the premise for every Greek, every Roman, every Asian god or goddess that you can imagine. There's a premise for that. And that is where the 200 watchers came down to Mount Hermon and took themselves human women and copulated with them and produced this genetic hybrids, which you believe what Jesus said. He said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. So however it was when Noah was walking, the genetic manipulation is how it will be when Jesus returns. And brother, I do believe we are in that day.
It sure seems like it. Everything's kind of falling in line more and more and faster. That's the part that is really accelerating, that I've been very, every generation since going way back into the dawn of man have always felt that within their lifetime they'll see the Son of God come back. But more than ever,
every generation hasn't had what we have.
Yes, that's just it.
And
Everything.
And what is 70 years in God's time frame?
No,
the Bible says that one day is as 1,000 years to God. One day is as 1,000 years. So time is a very relative thing.
That's right.
It depends on who's looking at time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and from his perspective, time, and he's created the laws of nature, and so time and space are one. They're instant. And so it's just a flick of time if you associate a time frame with it for him.
Well, he says he declared the end from the beginning, which literally means he finishes something, then backs it up and starts it. That's how come no word of God will ever not come to pass, because he's already seen it. It's already finished. We just haven't, in our timeline, in our three-dimensional timeline, or 4 dimensions, counting time, we haven't got there yet.
No, it's the frog in the very, very slow, lukewarm pot of water.
Sure.
And we just don't see it around us. But we do now. Things are accelerating real fast, it seems like.
And it's getting to the point to where even the non-Christian sees it.
Yes.
That's the mind-blowing thing. Even the non-Christian looks at things that are happening right now since the pandemic, and they look and say, something's not right here. And for a non-spiritual person, well, I shouldn't say non-spiritual, but from a non-Christian perspective, for them to say it has got to mean something.
Right. And I've noticed a few people on television talking about that they are either agnostic or atheists, and I've seen this a couple places where they're starting to pay attention to these things now a bit more. So I do concur with you on that for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is it that when you started getting into this a bit more and you started seeing this, when you were at what point did you start seeing with your careers and whether it was in the military, law enforcement, or this protective service, where did you start seeing or hearing the satanic rituals coming into play, and that where was that moment that you went, my gosh?
Well,
This,
my first exposure to it was working in the psych unit.
okay.
And
And was that
uh,
psych unit for military men and women, or is that just general psych?
no, this is general. This is a psych unit for people who have committed crimes and been found guilty in a court of law that needed to be incarcerated, but still had mental troubles to where they couldn't be housed with general population.
Okay.
And most states, well, I'm pretty sure every state has a male and a female institution to where one of those wards exists. And it was in one of those wards where I first started being exposed to inmates who would share in their therapy sessions some of the things that kind of made them who they are. And it was those things that made them who they are that kind of took me back and said, wow, okay, whoa, no wonder you burnt your house down around you and your kids. I mean, there's no wonder because of the abuse that you suffered. I mean, you're talking about females that were kept in captivity and bred for the sole purpose of sacrificing their children.
My gosh.
Much like the Old Testament, where they would sacrifice their children to Moloch or to Baal. Guess what? That hasn't gone anywhere.
Oh my gosh.
It's just a new wrapper put on it. And then, of course, the farther I got along in my career, when I discovered that our government actually instituted some of this programming with some of the now declassified programs like Monarch, Bluebird, things of those nature, Operation Paperclip, you start to see that some of that what I call mind science, where they start programming people, that's how it's done, is through ritualistic abuse. I'll just share with you kind of the nuts and bolts of how it happens.
Okay.
So if let's say I want to program Lance Hightower. I catch Lance Hightower at an impressionable age, typically prepubescent. Okay.
Okay.
And what I start doing is I start instituting severe physical and emotional trauma on you. Now, what the actual physical brain does as a defense mechanism is it starts to wall off those memories to keep you sane from cracking. Okay. I'm trying to use terms that everybody's going to understand.
Okay.
Okay. And what the powers that be, and I'll use that term, or the people who are doing the programming do, is once that sub-personality is created, that is for basically the brain creates a sub-personality to protect the core person from this trauma that is repetitive. They start programming each individual personality to do certain things, whether it could be a linguist, it could be an assassin, it could be high-level priests and priestesses. Now, this might sound out there, but this is the way it's done.
Okay.
And you can actually read the manuals out of Fort Bragg, which is where a lot of this started occurring. And this is how it's done. And we still do it to this day to a limited degree. So they create these sub-personalities in people that can be later called up by use of a trigger, some kind of trigger, the old Manchurian candidate type trigger, whatever that might be. And when that particular task is accomplished, that particular genie, so to speak, is put back in the bottle, and then the core person is left. That's how come when people are questioned and interrogated, they pass polygraphs, they can evade capture, because that person typically doesn't know what the hell they did.
Hmm.
It's a sub-personality that has done it. So if the old term was multiple personality disorder.
Right.
Now it's called dissociative identity disorder, DID. But all it is programming done through ritualistic means.
Okay.
They might repeatedly rape a child and traumatize them or beat them, starve them, any form or combinations of these particular tortures to cause that mental break. And then when that personality is developed, to keep the core person safe, they program that sub personality, and you can have multiples. You ever seen the movie Split?
I have not, but I've seen segments of it. I've seen parts and pieces of it. That's pretty
That's another
darn
example
scary.
of Hollywood. Yeah, that's another example of Hollywood doing soft disclosure. That is a very realistic adaptation. That kind of stuff happens. I mean, I personally have seen people flip, and a 105-pound lady can take a 400-pound table full of sand and throw it like a damn frisbee because it's not them. I've seen it with my own eyes. I had one inmate broke a male nurse's neck and his spine, picked him up over her head and broke his neck and back, and she weighed about 115 pounds.
My gosh.
So, yeah, I've seen this kind of thing live and in person.
So with this personality, this dissociative programming, during this programming, is this demonic entity also entering them at the same time? Is that what this is, to give them this supernatural strength?
Well, of course, that is exactly what happens. They program in the real sense, and they infuse, if I don't know a better word, infuse, attach demonic entities to that personality. They attach a supernatural element to them. I mean, we find, and this is not far-fetched, I mean, we find biblical examples of this. I mean, look at Jesus when he cast out demons from the man at the Gadarenes. When he asked the demons, he said, "What is your name?" We said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And a legion was 6,000 Roman soldiers.
Wow.
So literally, if you think about demonic possession, which is what this is, and nuts and bolts of it, think of your brain as a computer chip. Okay? How many viruses do you think can fit on a computer chip? Lots, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it works the same in the demonic realm. You're talking about literally thousands of these entities can possess one body at one time. And I'm not saying possession in the Hollywood term where you think about, all the movies that can come to your head about possession. Possession does not really mean that in the Greek. It just means demonized, influenced by.
Okay.
So that's kind of the way it works. You can literally have thousands of these demons attached to you or working in you, and they can be called up at any time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just writing this down here. Okay.
It really is fascinating.
Yeah. So you saw this with these people doing, and you hear these stories, and you heard this. So at present,
what what exists around us, so to make it applicable? I mean, I know this goes on every day. You said something about doctors and, or excuse me, attorneys and reputable people at a local level, and what what is in it for them to do such a horrendous? I mean, I know it's about power, greed, um, money, all those things. But is there something more underlying that you have found? And why would a person, these people that are prominent in our community, what is in it for them to be a part of this? What do they get out of it? I'm trying to
Well,
just go ahead.
how does it benefit them?
Yeah, how does it benefit them? And um,
Well, you said a lot of it: power, money, status. Uh, these are all things that are the things that they want to get out of it. And you can take it. Let's take the music and the celebrity industry, for example. You can only go so far in those industries unless you bend the knee.
mm,
Okay? You will get to a certain level and you will go no farther unless you bend the knee, because people above you, these Hollywood producers, these music industry moguls, you won't get the big contracts. You won't get the big movie deals unless you're willing to, and use the term sell your soul, which really that is a misnomer. You can't really sell your soul. Nobody can. Jesus bought your soul. He said you've been bought with a price.
mm,
You can sell your mindset in service to Satan. But that's kind of the way it goes. If you want the highest levels of status, power, money, fame, from the local level all the way to at least politically, socially, culturally, then you're going to have to bend the knee to the God of this world. And that is what the Lord said about Satan. He said he is the God of this world. You wonder why things are going the way they're going? Is because he's the God of this world right now.
hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It ties in absolutely what I have read, heard,
I mean,
and
they want youth. Why do you think these people live 100 years, 112? I mean, that they have these extravagant long lives. Well, because they're doing things to literally extend their life past what would be considered a normal lifespan.
hmm,
They're engaged in using adrenochrome. They're in, I mean, this goes back thousands of years. You had monarchs for hundreds of years bathing in baby blood. Historical documented facts. I mean, you
oh,
got restaurants right now. You got a restaurant right now in California that serves human meat openly. It's on their website. I mean, it's right there in front of your face, for people's face, if they want to look into it and want to believe.
how can they do that?
Well, when you control the wheels of power, you can do what you want to do.
Well, I
Does that
know.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I know there's a lot of shiftiness going on behind the scenes on so many different levels, at the military level, at a national level as far as government, and even much deeper and more above top secret than that. And it
Oh, yeah, for
reminds
sure.
me of the rituals. The satanic rituals is best word. I keep using that over and over. But the satanic rituals, that whether it's the Bohemian Grove,
Yep.
that's all that is. And these are,
Well, sure. That's worship of Moloch.
yes, and it's like decisions are predestined, pre-made. And when you and that I understand, started doing some reading into this, there is no left or right. There's certain words they do not use while they're there. They don't use the word policy. They don't use the word Republican, Democrat. Um, they are
Oh,
all,
all that is a mirage. There is no such thing as Democrat and Republican. It's two sides of the same bird.
hmm.
See, that's because war is profitable.
Very, very profitable.
That's why we've known 17 years of peace since our founding. 17 years of peace.
Wow.
Let that sink in. Only 17 years has the United States not been at war since its founding.
That's pretty incredible to think about.
Isn't it, though?
It really
It's
is.
almost like it's supposed that somebody wants it to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's disheartening that there are people that want war. They want dysfunction. They want incontinuity. They want, because it is profitable, first of all, but I was telling my wife, I said, you know what? It's almost like when we're growing up, history isn't history. History is dates, well-known figures, bent on the facts, but it's not really history of what we learned. It's totally opposite and skewed, and there's just a little bit of what we read as far as truth, quote unquote truth. And I said,
Well, most of our history most of our true history is is hidden or forbidden. The history as we know it is written by people who want and for what they want you to know and believe.
that's it. It's perceptions.
That's right. Exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Wow. So this ties in, then, in a backdoor sort of way with these Nephilim. And did you ever come across anything in which there was any? And I'm just throwing this out there. I have no idea. I'm just asking. Any of these people that talked about rituals, or they would anything where they'd use effigies of Nephilim or anything like that, or they went into the woods and they would have any
All the time.
Mm.
All the time.
Could you go into that a bit?
Well, there are certain, I'm going to use the term religions, that use effigy all the time as your point of contact between the divine realm, or the spirit realm, and the natural realm. Santeria, for one. Palo Mayombe, which is black magic, came out of the Congo. It actually settled into New Orleans, and that's where we get voodoo from.
Mm.
They use effigies of, I hate to use the term saints because it's not that at all. They use the term saints. There's little statuettes and things, and they use those as representations of who they truly worship.
Hmm.
Most certainly.
Okay.
So yes, I've seen that. There are specific rituals actually designed to, in the highest levels of witchcraft and occultism, different. I'm not going to get into which ones specifically over the phone, nor the rituals themselves. But let's just say there are rituals that are specifically designed to transform the human being into a beast. And let's just leave it at that.
Well, yeah, my brother and I, we were discussing this with. I was talking to a native gentleman not too long ago, and then a family member, and he lives near a reservation area, and he caught on one of his game cameras, in addition to having looked through a rifle scope, he thought he was going to shoot a coyote, and when the coyote turned around, it had, and this is a family member telling me this, he said, Lance, it had the face of a man. It had the face of a freaking man. And he just freaked out for a second. because he wasn't expecting that. He was just going to pop a coyote because he had cattle out there and he didn't want those coyotes to harass these calves. And when it turned around, it just totally shocked him. And he got on a game camera of something very similar, and he shared it with an elder in the area because they live where there's some reservation land. And the elder said, you need to erase that off your camera, and which meant the game camera, and don't talk about it. He said, well, what is it? Why? He said, well, he basically said there are people that can shapeshift, and you might be killing them, basically. He didn't come out and say it, but that's what he meant. And my family member said, well, how can they do this? He said, well, that's not for you to know right now, basically. And he said,
That's right.
He said, this is not, he did say, the world you know is not what you think. This is of another world. And that's kind of all he said in so many words.
Well, the spirit world is all, the spirit realm, I call it the realm, spirit realm is all around you every day. If you just have eyes to see, it coexists right alongside your natural plane of existence.
Well,
you know it.
Do you think,
as a Christian, you know it when you go into prayer? I mean, it's a reason why when we go and assemble ourselves together, that the atmosphere changes. And I'm sure you have experienced this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reason why that happens, because you're coming into the presence and coming into the Spirit of God, which is a supernatural entity.
Do you, when we come into the presence of God, or when we come into that spiritual aspect of God, are we cutting in? Is that in a dimension that? Because I've heard there was a gentleman not too long ago. My brother Bill and I were talking that we were talking about, without getting too deep in here, but we were talking about frequency, light, and we were talking about that. And I can't remember where I was listening to this, if it was on one of the programs of the Fallon Brothers, but it was almost like the reason why that you have to want to see, and you have to be, and that darkness, and I think this whole conversation got started when we heard that in CERN, Switzerland, they were talking about the this research in dark matter, and that they're not so much researching the dark matter as possibly and potentially researching how to create it. And which means that within this creation or attempt to create it, it's opening up a dimension of this darkness, which is in this fourth or fifth or whatever dimension, sixth dimension. And so my question is that when we're in the Spirit of God, are we in a dimension that puts us more in tune because we're at a certain frequency level? We're in this vibratory frequency.
That is my belief, that you are vibrating at a frequency that is putting you into close proximity to where God resides, to that spirit realm, when you're vibrating in that particular frequency.
And we say vibrating, it's to not lose people. Everything has vibrational frequency around us, whether it's the light bouncing off my face, the sound that everyone's hearing, the light coming from the sun, everything, whether it's vibrating at a lower.
It has a vibratory and oscillatory rate.
Mm-hmm.
Everything does. The trees, the sun, you yourself. And it's really a science behind it.
There is. Absolutely.
Matter of fact, I mean, it is most scholars' belief, and mine as well, that that's what caused the walls of Jericho to fall, was the vibratory rate that occurred when the shofars were blown in specific times, in specific order, that it actually crystallized the walls of Jericho and caused them to collapse. And there's evidence of that in science today with ultrasonic, or different frequency levels, whether it be infrasound, ultrasound.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually crystallize and turn steel into crystalline substance that breaks apart like dust in the wind. We just have not gotten to a point to where we are remembering this knowledge, which I believe we one time had.
Yeah, I think you're onto something with that too. I do agree with that. I think that it seems foreign to us because it's not something that we've
Well, we've been dumbed down.
we've been very dumbed down, and our current culture dumbs us all down. Whether when I tell my wife, I said, it's pretty sad when we were looking at the overall global and national scores of kids today, just in public schools alone. We're just looking at those numbers, and we're so wrapped up as a society in general where we're worried about J Lo, her next beau, and
Yeah.
where other countries are bypassing us in math, science, engineering, development, entrepreneurship. And it's just sad that education has taken a back door. And with that, the education of really connecting back with God, and that it's we've just lost tune to nature, to God.
Well, we are rediscovering, in my opinion, ancient technologies. Just what we are using right now. Okay, so your smartphone, and I've used this analogy quite a bit. Your smartphone is really nothing but an ancient practice called scrying. You ever heard people using black mirrors?
Say that again.
Or you ever heard of people using black mirrors, or the ancient practice of people who would stare into flat surfaces of water and look at their reflection? Or how about this, the old children's story of mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, the next time you turn your cell phone off, look at what you got in your hand. You have a black mirror, is what you have, because you can see the reflection, your reflection in it. And if I would go deeper, if you hand me your phone in an unlocked position where I can just at will go into your phone and look through it,
Mm-hmm.
you give me 5 minutes, I'll know everything there is to know about Lance. Your reflection, not only visually, but your inward reflection is shown. Wrap your head around that for a second.
No, it doesn't surprise me, because I know they've been collecting a lot of information on us for
Well, it's not even them collecting it. You give it to them.
yes.
How many
Yes.
times you post on Facebook?
I don't post.
Instagram?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm saying you as in a generalized term, the average person, let's say 50+% of the population, they can put on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, Amazon. I can know what you buy, how many people live with you, what your kids' names are, see pictures of your home, in about a 5-minute cursory search of your cell phone, which is the inward reflection of your life. This is what witches and wizards and warlocks and necromancers and diviners, enchanters, all these people in biblical days, and I say biblical days as like it's not biblical days right now,
Right.
but this is what they did. This is how it was done, and it's witchcraft. I mean, you think about some of the foremost minds of our time says that advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If I hand your cell phone to somebody who lived 100 years ago, they'd think you were a freaking warlock.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, because if I handed them your laptop or turned on your 60-inch TV and I can watch something that's happening in the former Soviet Union right in front of my eyes, kind of gives a new preface on preachers of the past saying that when they preached out of Revelation, said the whole world will watch the three witnesses or the two witnesses be killed at the same time. Before the advent of television and satellites, people would have thought that God would have displayed it in the sky or sent you a vision. Now you can automatically turn your TV on and see something like that occur.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to unpack, and I knew it would be when you said you talked to me, which I'm very grateful you did. This kind of stuff needs to be exposed, especially in the cryptid community, because I'm of the belief that people in the cryptid community are more open and more susceptible to reality than the general populace.
Well, I think they are. I think you have, just like anything, when someone gets into something, either because, in this community, someone has an experience for the first time, or they have ongoing experiences just because of where they live, and they put more time into boots on ground, or they've never had an experience, but they just want to learn more. They have someone that close to them, a neighbor, a friend, a family member that had an experience, and they believe and they trust them. They know them, that they're a solid person, and then they have an experience and they want to learn more. So you have a variety of different of interest. But
well, not only that, you have people who, let's just say they've seen Bigfoot, they've seen Dogman, they've seen various cryptids. They have laid eyes on something that their whole life has been told by the powers that be that does not exist.
That's right. And so
then when they open and they see it and they know that they've been lied to about that, why wouldn't they lie to them about something else?
Well, that's just it. It opens this Pandora's box of what else? What else?
That's right.
What else?
That's right.
And, when I got a little bit more, my eyes were open every time that either by accident, usually it's just kind of happenstance, but is it really happenstance, or is it God opening my eyes up a little bit more since I'm more in tune? I don't know. I want to believe
it's God opening your eyes. There is no happenstance when it comes to these kind of subjects, because for us just to have this conversation is almost miraculous. What are the odds that you and I would chance cross paths in life? You live in Oklahoma. I'm in Virginia. 900 miles apart.
It would be unlikely, but
it would be very unlikely that this could occur unless it would be divine providence.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
The Lord said it. He said that there will be no time when my word is not preached, and there will be no time when the truth is not uncovered. That which is hidden shall be brought to light. Right?
That's right.
It says it multiple places. That's what the very word occultist means hidden.
Well, it's when I got into this, and many people know the story because I did a show on it, a couple shows, but I was doing an investigation. We were doing filming, and it wasn't too far from here, believe it or not. And I took an EMF reader, and I won't get into all the details, but we took an EMF reader to this place because there was some talk through some of the colleagues that when they go, they've had their EMF readers go off because they believe that these creatures emit some EMF readers. Now I'm beginning to wonder if it's really the cryptid creatures, or if it wasn't the spiritual aspect of the unseen spirits in the area that we're at. But I took an EMF reader and I gave it to my brother, and I was doing other things, and he said, Lance, and I could hear my EMF reader just pegging out red the whole time. And he says, is this thing broke? Because have you used it? And I said, well, I've tested it, but it could be broken. This is the first time I've officially used it. Well, later in the investigation, it was going off still, and I said, you know what? Give me that. And I looked at it, I turned it off, and long story short, I said, let me do something here. I said, my name is Lance. I come in the name of the Lord. I come in peace, in respect. Is there anyone with us here? And then when I did that, beep, it was a reply. And I told my brother, I said, give me a recorder real quick. And so we did this. And then I went back home and I listened. And I got an intelligent response every time. I said, holy cow. So, again, long story short, I went back. I apologized for our being there. And I talked to the neighbor. And he said, Lance, my gosh, that confirms it. I said, what do you mean confirms it? What do you mean? He said, well, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to worry you guys. He goes, but where you tent camped, I have a boy. He's since passed away, but he told me he found unmarked graves down there. And he believes there were Native Americans and that something may have happened some years ago that was a terrible skirmish or something happened. And that's what he felt.
Well, sure. I mean, it's not just people who can have a demonic attachment. It's areas, places.
And so what's really weird is that I went down there. Everything was fine. I went by myself. And I came in the name of the Lord. And the EMF reader was going off as soon as I stepped out. And this was in the daytime. And I said, before I left, I said, I wasn't down there 10 minutes. I said a prayer and that nothing attaches to me or anything like that. And then I went back down and, I listened to the recording and I could hear in the background as I was saying this prayer before I left, I could hear literally in the background, hey, 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 hear these drums. And, and my wife, I let her listen. She goes, you put that in there. And I said, I don't know how to put that in there. That was there. I was recording and it's like in the background. So I went back a third time and no EMF, nothing, zero, zilch, nothing went off. I went back 2 more times, nothing at all. I went like a 4th time and I took my brother, I took Wiley Dave and we went at night and I used my, and this is where it gets kind of weird. I took my thermal scan special camera. It's got an infrared and it's got a thermal on it. And the thermal is I can see heat signatures. And I went down there and I was more cryptid related. This is not, I know it's all spiritual, but I was looking for something more physical, tangible in this dimension, right? I was looking for a heat signature, a body, which would show up of white. And I'm scanning around and I go down to the end of this pump jack road and I go by myself. It was about, maybe 250 yards from the truck, and the guy stayed at the truck, and I walked back. I didn't see anything. Well, I still published the show, and a subscriber said, Lance, do you see what you caught? I said, what? He said, at minute such and such, and so many seconds, you caught something running in front of you. And I thought, I just kind of, pawned it off a little bit. I'm like, okay, I'll go back. So I didn't go back for about a few weeks, and one night I thought, I'll go back. And I looked, and oh my gosh, I caught something that wasn't physical. I caught something that was more spiritual. It was an entity, a dark entity that crossed ran right in front of me as I panned the camera. It ran in front, maybe it was about 10, 12 yards away, and it was running very fast. And I remember before I took my walk, I said, I come in the name of the Lord, who is the giver of life, who shines light into the world. And if there's anyone here, I bring peace to you. And it ran in front. I was panning to the right. It ran to the left. I mean, you could see clearly head, shoulders, arm swinging, body, and it's running. And then, but I didn't see it because I was looking for a hot white object. And then as I'm panning up in front of me, this is the part that gets really weird now that I'm paying attention to what I am looking at. I see clearly a dark ink black figure that crosses the road, not broadside, but literally kind of faces me and scoots across the road as I'm panning to the left. And you could see it clearly because the backdrop is a pump jack that's still very, very hot from the hot day, and it is just solid white. And then when this crosses in front, it is just ink black. And I think that was the time that really hit me that evil is real. I believe this entity to be evil, but it ran from me, and it didn't want anything to do with me based on what I was saying and based on what is in my heart and what I believe. But that was the thing that hit me, is that I'm really dealing with, there's a spiritual side that is real. It can manifest if it wants to, I'm sure, if it has enough energy behind it. I said, but I need to understand this a bit more before I start going into this deeper, whatever. And one of my brothers said, Lance, I'm not going to follow you. I don't want this thing attaching. I said, well, it won't attach because I know where my heart is at and where I come in the name of the Lord. I'm bringing peace. And I'm just trying to first see any of these cryptids on film, but I had no clue that this was going to show up. It was by accident. A subscriber saw it on a film that I posted, and I think that was it hit me how real that this demonic world really is, that we talk about, but you don't really see it. And when I saw it on my thermal camera, and what's interesting is that when it ran in front of my camera, I've got a heat display. It actually dropped in temperature as it ran across. So that was my
manifestation. See, this is the reasoning. This is why ritual is done in the first place. Ritual is done to manifest the unseen into the seen, to where things that are unseen are now into our realm where it's tangible. That's why all satanic ritual is done.
So rituals basically are performed to bring the unseen to the seen.
That's right. That's why they set up satanic altars. It's just like our altar at church. Okay? It's the same principle behind it. It's a meeting place between you and the divine, or in their case, them and their version of divine. Okay. That's how, and to make these spirits manifest, to make these entities manifest from purely the masses or the shadows that you're describing into physical form, it takes fear. The Bible speaks of the spirit of fear. Okay?
So
says that we are not given to a spirit of fear, but of power and of a sound mind.
So it takes fear from us to manifest.
Sure. And that's the way satanic ritual works. That's why the trauma is inflicted. You get the person as scared as they possibly can, and that gives the entity the energy, for lack of a better term, to manifest itself in physical form. Okay, so I'll give you an example.
Okay, that makes sense.
Have you you've watched horror movies, obviously, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so do a little experiment. Okay, and this is how I break it down for people when I'm lecturing on this subject to people. To do a little experiment, just take your favorite Halloween film or a scary movie, and I want you to watch it in its most intense parts, and I want you to watch it with the volume off. Okay?
Okay.
Then I want you to rewind it and watch it with the volume on. And you will have a different physiological response with the volume off than you do the volume on, or if you have the volume on and the picture off. Because you have 5 gates to your body: your touch, your smell, your taste, your eyes, your ears, okay, your nose. So 6, okay? Those are 6 gates into you. The more, and in ritual magic, what they do is they trigger as many of those gates as possible to elicit a physiological response. That's how come when you go to like a 5D movie theater, your experience is totally different than if you go to a standard movie theater. Okay?
Okay.
The more of these gates that I can open, the more of a response I can get from you. So that's why when you go into, you see these rituals take place, and if you've ever watched one, they do not just one dimensional. They have smells, they have sounds, they have visual, they have all these stimuli that are introduced, touch for pain. They have all these stimuli that are going at the same time, giving your body the sensory overload to produce the maximum amount of fear and panic in the person involved in the ritual, thereby giving the entity the energy it needs to manifest itself.
Become stronger.
And become stronger. Exactly. Okay? That's why, I tell people who are involved in the cryptid research that I wish I could get this through them, that these things do not have to be just physical. There is a spiritual component to it. As much as you and I are physical creatures, we are physical beings.
And I think this
we
is not
sleep, we breathe.
This is not
and
spoken about a lot. This is
Well-
not even talked about a lot. I mean, I think there's still discussion going on whether, that I hear that, some people are like, yes, they have a language, they have a culture, kind of this, nomadic, rudimentary type of culture, but no one, and we believe that I don't hear many people talking about that they have a spiritual aspect about them. And if so, what is that? So I think you're right. It's really not spoken about enough, or talked about enough.
Well, there's no reason to have all these different camps of straight flesh and blood, straight spirit. You don't have to differentiate. As much as you are physical, you are spiritual too. Right?
Right.
You are a physical being. And matter of fact, if I really want to get technical, you are a spiritual being living in a physical existence. Because who Lance is not your flesh and blood.
Right. That's
who Lance is the spirit man inside of you, in this vessel.
Right. We have a temporary house.
It's a temporary house. That's exactly right. And these things is my belief. Of course, nobody's an expert. I caveat all that with that.
Okay.
But it is my belief that is indeed the case.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
And if it's not the case, for sure, it has to be at least looked at as a possibility.
Well, and I just break it down on a real simple kind of. I look at we have 2 dogs, and we love them. They're part of our family. They don't do much to really guard my house or anything, but we love them. And the way I look at it is that, my wife and I have had this discussion, whether they have a soul or what. And I said, well, this is just my thoughts, is that they have a spirit in them that they're well taken care of. We love them. They love us. But being that they are existing, they are alive in the physical form that, we see them, we touch them, we use our kinesthetic touch, and we hear them, our auditory, that they have a live spirit in there. Now, being that so, why wouldn't these highly intelligent beings, these cryptids, have that and more? So that makes sense to me, and that's kind of how.
Well, from the Christian perspective, I cannot prove biblically that they have a spirit, but I can prove biblically that animals can have a spirit, it can house one, because you see it evident when Jesus cast the demons out of the man into Gadarenes. Where did he send them?
He sent them into the swine.
and those spirits entered the swine.
Mm-hmm.
So animal can, biblically, can have a spirit enter them. And if a swine can do it, why not one of these things?
That's right. And so that's just, my rudimentary thoughts on it, and that's what me thinking on the cryptid world again, is that why couldn't they have a, a spirit aspect or entity about themselves? And so, but I know I don't spend a lot of time listening to a lot of shows, because I'm busy doing mine and, I work and things like that. But I think this is something that's really not spoken about a lot out there in the cryptid community at all.
Well, it's one of those third rails, right?
It is. It is. And
It's one of those third rails.
And then when you get into it, it gets a little uncomfortable to talk about how and why and where did it come from. And that's still in debate too, about, when people say that Nephilim and, where do they come from? And they talk about the labs and the possibility of redesigning and manipulating.
Well, I know that for 100% fact from talking to, like I said, people who have been involved in this game at the governmental level for years.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it is a possibility.
Oh, yeah.
Is 100% accurate.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether even the fact that they're doing it is 100% accurate. I mean, if somebody can get on Amazon and order a Cas CRISPR-9 kit and genetically grow something in your garage, what the hell do you think the federal government can do?
Oh, they can go far beyond that, and they do, and they do it without really fully. I would say sometimes, I'd like to think. I remember I worked for a company way back in the day before I met my wife, and it was I was working for this company, very professional on the outside, massive company, and I graduated college, and you just see trucks coming and going, and they got their big logo on it, and just massive facility. I think there was about 2,000 people worked there, and you just think from the outside, this place is running like a well-oiled machine. You get inside, and just still visually on the surface, everything looks like it's just rocking, boom, boom, boom. But when you actually get in the bowels of the company, you realize, how in the world do we get any product out the door? We're just having more problems. And so it's kind of like the analogy to me, how the government with these, when they start getting into these things they shouldn't be dabbling in, but they do. I don't think they're fully aware of what they're doing. Sometimes they are, but they're not.
Well, it's compartmentalized.
It is,
and I know that for a fact. In just dealing with the security side of things, when I've had and worked supplemental security for the Secret Service, for example, even though I'm working supplementally with them for the same goal, there's certain aspects of what is happening with the principal person that we're trying to protect that are still closed off. And even amongst that group, there is a contingency plan and things that are closed off from that group. So it's all working toward the same goal, but you're only given information that directly relates to what your task is, and that's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It reminds me of, the compartmentalization. That was a aspect that came about once during the Eisenhower administration. He just said, I think it was him that said, beware of the military industrial complex. This is back in 56.
That's why certain leaders over the years have had to go. They've had to be either, let's just say they've been removed by one means or another, because their plans involved tearing certain organizations into millions of pieces. And the conglomerate can't have that. They can't have that, because then the jig is up, you see.
Right. And they want to still operate.
That's right. They want to still operate with impunity. They want to still be able to traffic their narcotics. They still want to traffic their weapons. And they want to traffic their human commodities. Let's just
Yeah.
put it like
Well,
that.
and continue with these ritualistic hidden agendas that, for instance, another thing that we indirectly didn't realize, and it was a kind of a hit me all of a sudden. When I started doing in 2017 these interviews, I got busy really fast with having this toll-free number. But what I started realizing is there was other people behind the scenes. They would call me back. They said, Lance, someone showed at my doorstep after we
Oh
spoke.
yeah.
And I
Oh
said,
yeah.
what? And then, long story short, what I found out is that there was a government agency that, or I shouldn't say agency, rather than it's probably a conglomerate of agencies. It was rather a program, because I know each each of these unacknowledged programs are classified. They have a name for them, an unclassified or secret classified name to them. So anyway, these people would show up and ask them questions and never would acknowledge who they were, their name, who they worked for. But there's a few of the vehicles that, as they were driving away, they saw that they had government tags, U.S. government tags. Nowadays, they're not so
No, they
blatant
use
with it.
covered. They use covered tags.
Yeah.
When I say covered tags, they mean they have manufactured tags from the state that they're in that they can just slap on at any time, and they come back to civilian use automobiles.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Because we do it. I mean, we do it right now as a company when we have specific clientele. We do it ourselves. So I know if we do it as a private entity, and it can be done, that the government does it for sure.
Yes, and that's what was happening. And I realized that there was this agency or these groups of people that were basically to cover up the sighting, and they would go through absolute, very invasive, very threatening verbiage to get this, or this psychological warfare to get someone to basically shut your mouth, or we can make your life very much a hell. And they have a lot of the client. There's some people that they have completely closed down bank accounts, and
That's
when
right.
they open back up weeks or months later, there is absolutely nothing left in the bank account. And someone could say, "Wait a minute, Lance. How in the world can someone do that? How can they do that?" Well, they did it. Number one, you don't know who did it. You're trying to say an agency did it, and anything that goes back electronically to that bank to give a reason, you're asking the bank, "What's going on?" They said, "Well, it says IRS problems." Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Who's
yeah, no.
who's going to
Well,
argue that at a bank level? They're not going to argue at a local bank level. So,
these agencies have what they call MAA, mutual aid agreements, and we had them at the state and local level, to where certain agencies, in times of crisis, work together for the benefit of the mission, and they put aside all their jurisdictional boundaries and things of that nature until such time as the crisis is resolved. That's the way it's done. That's the way the sausage is made, unfortunately.
yeah, and it's unlawful, it's unconstitutional, but you know,
Well, it's actually lawful now, thanks to our powers that be. Ever since the Patriot Act, it's actually quite lawful.
well, I always say that in
Well,
knowing that it's
it might
lawful,
not be right,
that's
but just
it.
because something's lawful doesn't make it right.
That's true.
There's a lot of things that are lawful that can be done. The question is they ethically or morally, should they be done?
Right. Correct. Especially when someone didn't ask to see something that frightened them and they're just trying to get answers and they have no clue. They think they're talking to someone that's going to give them some answers, so they completely spill their beans, spill the guts on what they saw. They're still in shock, and if not, a level of high anxiety or PTSD, and then they find out after the fact that that person, those people that they spilled their guts to, basically were the ones responsible for closing down their account, why they lost their job, and all kinds of other incorrect propaganda and lies. But
Well, and if that doesn't work, they'll kill you.
yeah,
That
that's the
I mean,
part.
that's the long and short of it. If you don't shut up, especially when it comes to these subjects that we've talked about for an hour and a half, if you do not shut up and none of those intimidation tactics work, they'll just whack you. because the powers they don't care about human life. You're an expendable asset from them from the time you're born
What?
until the time you push up daisies.
That's a good
That's
point.
it.
What?
You are expendable.
So I have a question for you. With your extensive background and knowledge, and being an expert in this, I heard this is secondhand information, but it doesn't surprise me. Basically, I have a friend that went to a conference this year, and he was talking to a gentleman, and this gentleman was someone I had previously interviewed, and I recorded the conversation, but I promised him that I would just do a narration of the show. And so I did. I did a narration of the show, and I typed everything up except I just was relaying what I said, what he said, and that's kind of how the show went. Well, apparently, this gentleman went to a conference and explained that he did a interview, and I don't know if he mentioned me or not, but he said he previously did an interview, and when I heard the story, I knew it was me that did the interview. And he said shortly after, excuse me, shortly after our conversation, maybe about 3 or 4 months later, this is again secondhand information, but I do trust the gentleman that told me that this gentleman, after he had the interview with me, he drives a truck, and that he was crossing a border up in Canada, I believe. And being a trucker, that's no big deal. He crosses quite frequently, and you have to show the manifest of what you're carrying. And if they want to look on your rig, they look on your rig, whatever, and then you go about your way. And he's used to kind of going through those formalities. And then they pulled him over, and he showed the manifest, and they said, yeah, I don't need to see that. There's some people coming. And he's like, what? And I don't know, I wasn't there, but I'm just kind of gathering a little bit of probably what was said. And there was 2 people that showed up, and they said, we need to take your firearm. So long story short, they must have somehow infiltrated what he had done, but in the interview, he had killed one of these dogman creatures. And it was really interesting what one of these guys, while they had pulled him over at this station at the border, they said, give me your firearm. And he did. And in the process, they were very vague. One of these men, said, you killed one of our assets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, I know what an asset is when you're talking in as far as financial terms and taxes and things, but in your opinion, what do you think they were referring to? And you killed one of our assets.
Well, it's been my experience that an asset, in that context, relates to something that you own or control.
Well, that's what it implies to me, but I just wanted to get your take and see what you thought as well.
I mean, that's pretty much what it is. If somebody uses that vernacular, that you've killed an asset, it means that you've eliminated something that they own or have direct control over, that they use for whatever they use it for. Let's put it like that. That kind of thing happens all the time.
I was shocked, I guess, with the term. I quickly recognized the story.
Well, it's not like they're going to come out and say that you shot one of our dogmen.
Yeah, no, they'll never use that term because they have other program.
They have. I'm quite certain they have their version of scientific names for it.
Yeah, or very rudimentary names, but it's wrapped up in an acronym or something like
That's
that.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And that's what I was telling people. So I got another question for you. You have, again, I'm asking you because you're an expert on this, and you're probably up to this point. I've tried to get some people to talk about this subject, but it seems like they shy away from it. So it's really kind of meant to be that we talk. But I'm in the process of writing. I've got 2 or 3 books right now that I'm writing at the same time, and I know you shouldn't do that because my mind jumps sometimes with ideas, and so I'll just skip around and write on one book for a while, then write on another. One of the books involves talking about what I know, how to identify, and this is written for a newly someone that's just had a recent encounter, or a person that has multiple encounters, or they just want to know, what did I see, what to expect, who are these people that might show up, and if they do, I know with who they are, or who were these people that showed up. So it gives information to the person out there that had encountered these cryptids. I'm writing a book on these people that show up, and I hate using the word MIB, but I know collectively that's what people use as a term. But these people that are working at this above top secret program.
So use the term OGA, other government agency.
OGA. Okay, I'll use that.
That's probably a good catch-all.
Okay. So in writing this book, what is the risk of writing this and putting it out to the public?
Depends on what you're going to include this on the program?
Say that again.
Are you going to air this portion, or are we talking?
It depends. If you think I won't air what you're getting ready to tell me, if it's very, I can take this out. Let me hang on a second.
Well, no, you can keep it in if you want to.
Okay, well, just go ahead and talk about it. Then we'll I'll make a note here. I'll make a.
What do I think the risks of?
Yes.
I think the risks are quite high if you're divulging something that they deem as sensitive information. Now, I can't tell you what they would deem as sensitive information. I can give you some ideas just based on the clientele I've had and some of the conversations that I've been in party to, and people's general conversation over dinner and plane rides and things of that nature.
Okay.
But I think that anything that directly implicates specific organizations or agencies in nefarious activity, and you have documentation or evidence to that effect, could put you in very serious danger.
Okay.
At a minimum for intimidation, financially, and if it's serious enough, physically.
Okay.
How would you like your medical license got, for example?
Yeah. No, I thought about all that. Yeah, I thought about all that.
They stripped away Dr. Ben Carson's medical license because he supported Trump. The first man who successfully separated conjoined twins at the brain. And if they'll do that to a public figure, what do you think they're going to do to Dr. Lance Hightower from Oklahoma?
Yeah. I'm small fries. Yeah, and then they'll go home and sleep like a baby. And
they'll go home and sleep like a baby because it doesn't affect them.
No.
They're shielded. See, now when I say other government agency, it doesn't have to be. And a lot of times these people don't use official government agencies. If I could tell you the amount of government contracts of companies that are contracted and they use and act under the authority and auspiciousness of a government agency, it would blow your mind. I mean, I trained at one of these facilities back in the early 2000s that had a particular government contract in Afghanistan and Iraq. And, when their usefulness was over, they crucified them. You would know the agency if I shared it with you. So they use these contractual agencies that are civilian but act with the complete and total authority of the federal government. So you have to be mindful of that too. It's not just your typical alphabet agencies that are come knocking on your door. It's these subordinates, these contractual people who are not beholden to the same legal ramifications that some of these agencies have to abide by. That's why they fap some of this stuff out.
Yeah, They farm it out. And
They farm it out.
well, that's one thing that I do listen to a lot of Dr. Stephen Greer, who is on the UFO aspect of it. And, he's talking about, and some of the same groups that subdue or suppress the knowledge of that these UFO entities or these civilizations that are present are the same, in my opinion, just different program name, are what's keeping suppressed the acknowledgement of these creatures, these beings, their existence as well. So
Sure.
there's very much an overlap here, and that's what I started, because he's a bit more quite extensive. The tapped into a lot of the agencies that he's had whistleblowers come to him, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, now here is a emergency room physician that left practice to, I guess you could say, definitely investigate more, and the path that he decided to go upon went deeper and wider than he ever thought. And so now he's interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of people regarding this subject. But when I started watching this was very much how these people did what they did, was very much in the analogy of what they did to some of the people in the cryptid community, except that he has a bit more influence because he's obviously in Washington. He informs current presidents, heads of state, and in other countries as well regarding the suppression of this information. Now, it's not so much that these UFOs are real or not, as he's trying to say. It's the suppression of the energy aspect that has been given to our government, and we decline to use it intentionally and go with very rudimentary, crude forms of energy, such as what we are aware of: gas, oil, coal, petroleum, fossil fuels. And
That's because it's just like medicine. There's no money in a cure, there's money in treatment.
that's right. That's right. There's no money in prevention. I had
That's right.
I had a very astute mentor in school when I was getting my training. He said, "Lance, just remember, there's no money in prevention. There is in crisis care."
That's right.
And
The medical industrial complex cannot continue if they openly give out the keys to the store.
that's right. That's
And it
right.
works the same way with the military industrial complex or the prison industrial complex, the information, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
See, governments don't have the real power, corporations do.
And that's the thing that Dr. Greer does talk about. The majority of the power is by the corporations, and they're held under the same contractual agreement that the government. He goes, trust me, when they have a whether it's a corporate entity or a newbie that is read into these programs, that I understand, that are read into these programs, that they make no bones about it. They'll take them to a very secure skiff or somewhere to that nature, and they'll say, "Here's a bullet. It has your name on it. You are to not talk to anyone ever. Family member, spouse, doesn't matter. You're held to
That,
the same secrecy as all of us."
and
So,
that infiltrates down to lesser excuse me, lesser
bless
degrees.
you.
Thank you. Lesser degrees into local authorities too. I mean, it's not that extensive, but as much as they can squelch and censor information at the lowest level, it's easier to do that at a local level than as a higher level. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what do you think, in your opinion? Because I've given some advice to people. I hope this is still kind of somewhat on track. Is that if someone, what's the best advice, I guess, if someone has a very close encounter, and if it was frightening, if there was some aggression by this creature to them, and they need to talk to someone like me just to say, "Hey, I did this." In your opinion, I mean, obviously they shouldn't post anything on social media. How how best should someone reach out? How and what not to do on a
uh, what to do, what not to do on a non-technology level, as well as a very rudimentary level, as far as sharing with family, friends, anything like this. I mean, hopefully, I'm coming across kind of what I mean here.
Okay, so I'm getting the gist of what you're saying. How do they get the information out without it being surveilled, tracked, intercepted, deleted, those type things? That's what you're trying to say?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Well, uh, documentation wise, all right. Let's just say you kill one of these things. Okay.
Okay.
Absolutely no photographs on a device that is connected to the internet. Zero. So if you take a photograph, make sure it's done via Polaroid or the old style wind up Kodak type
Hmm.
box cameras that you would buy in the gas station. So no photographs with anything that's connected to the cloud or to the internet in any way, because they can be erased and deleted. Once it's out there, it's out there. Okay.
Okay.
Um, Same way they use compartmentalization, you do the same. Okay. So keep that circle extremely small. Okay. If you need medical, say you've been attacked, you need medical treatment, do not go in there and say, I got scratched or bit by a werewolf. Okay. You're going to go in there and say, I had a dog attack. I had a bear attack, whatever. Lie.
Yeah.
right off the jump. Lie. Get the medical treatment that you need. Okay.
Okay.
Get patched up, bandaged up, whatever it is. Get that taken care of first, your life-sustaining needs, especially if you've been in some sort of attack. Okay? Because you're not going to tell anybody about it outside of this community anyway.
Right.
There's anybody who knows anything, as soon as you call the game warden or a local law enforcement officer, gig is up. It's over.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's what I tell
It's
people.
over.
They've got special numbers and contact points that basically you tell them. The game warden may not, they may have a pretty good poker face, and they'll say, and in some cases, they've said, some of the game wardens have said, okay, and they'll take an initial report, which never gets reported at the public level, but they'll say, in a couple days, you might be visited by some people, if you don't mind.
Right.
They'll
Right.
make it real soft. Well, who? Well, they're interested in probably this case, and that's very softly, in other words, saying these other government agents that will come in and possibly do some threat. They're just trying to. What I've noticed is that they try to assess in their questioning
If this
how.
person is going to be a leak.
Yeah, are they going to be a leak, and are they going? How hard-headed are they going to be? How stubborn are they
Yeah.
going to be about what they
What are
saw?
we going to have to do to keep this shut
Yes,
up to the public? Yeah.
yes,
Well, and that's the way it works. So what you have to do is you have to limit their ability to do that, or then for their ability for them to even know about your situation. So taking the photographs with a non-connected device, you can, even if I would say, get a piece of the creature
mm-hmm.
and a substantial piece, the head. For example, I would say do that, but it comes once again, who you going to call?
Right,
Uh,
right,
then there's no lab. The reality is no lab's going to touch it. Nobody is going to do any kind of genetic testing for you. And once you do that, you have opened yourself up to all kinds of scrutiny. Look at Dr. Ketchum.
mm-hmm.
Her word was good enough to put people in the penitentiary, but the minute she started doing the Sasquatch Genome Project, she's a fool, right?
Mm.
So those are steps that you can take. And I would say pass information directly, just like chain of custody. I would go directly, even if I had to drive to you, directly and put it in your hands, that's what I would do. I
Okay.
would not submit anything via email, phone, text, carrier pigeon, whatever. These people have their tentacles in everything. You know,
Hmm.
that's my opinion. I just don't think there's any, until they're ready or they want to divulge this. Even if you had the damn body laying on the back of your truck on the evening news, that story will be buried,
Yeah.
cut from real, and everybody being signing NDAs and with threats of I mean,
No, I totally agree.
you know the drill.
I totally
You know,
agree, and and that was that was our premise. My brother and I, you know, we spend long time discussions of this very subject, and you know, some people I've heard that, you know, I'll put it in the back of the truck, hang it up at Walmart, and take a bunch of pictures, and the more people that you see, and all this on the news. I said, well, the problem with that's not going to work like how you think, and it will be buried. You will be you might get if it even goes to news, it's going to make it worse. And then because what it'll do is they'll make you look like an idiot. They'll just say the guys that had we ran the story of the Bigfoot in Walmart. Well, come to find out, it's a hoax.
that's
And
right.
these
They'll
guys
do
are.
anything they can do to contain it.
That's right, and they have that power to do anything, news, radio, whatever. And I learned from one of the. I tell you what, the learning lesson story that I just gained huge amounts of knowledge from was the show that we did called The Ohio Bigfoot Attack and Fed Cover Up.
Right.
I didn't realize how deep and wide everything really went until we did the interview. 3 days after that happened, I did the interview on him, and he was still in shock. And he was suffering a lot of PTSD from that, and you could hear it in his voice. But
And
the
his life is probably destroyed right now.
it was, and he contacted me 2 years after the fact, and we did a follow-up interview, and the same damn thing happened to him again. They closed his account. By this time, he was divorced.
Yeah.
He was divorced from the first thing that went down, and just a whole host of just unfortunate events. And they closed his account down again. And he knew instantly what happened. You know what happened when we spoke again. Different phones, everything did matter. And I felt bad. It's just a series of unfortunate events, but that are well planned. It was such a big deal of an event that they were still monitoring him 2 years after.
Of
And
course.
his cousin,
They'll never stop.
his cousin, yeah, I mean that's what I didn't know. I mean his cousin, who I never spoke to, and really this whole event put some distance between them both. Um, they weren't as close as before. They didn't talk a lot, but we surmised that the cousin, they're both cousins, not the cousin I spoke to, but the other one I didn't speak to. Um, we surmised that he was threatened. He was going through some custody issues and had some other things going on, and all of a sudden he just went silent. He was trying to pay the bill at the hospital, and he went there to pay the bill like a couple weeks later, and the hospital couldn't come up with anything. He wasn't ever there. And
That's right.
he got mad. He said, "Well, of course I was here. I was in room such and such. You remember I came here with a punctured lung. I got hit." And I don't know how long he was there, but he left very frustrated because there was no bill. There was no paperwork of him ever being there. He tried to collect his records. Records were gone. Records were gone. And there was charges brought up against him and the cousin because they tried to go to the radio station, and right at the radio station they were going to just have a special impromptu report locally, and while they were there the power goes out. Phone call comes in to the station manager, The station manager says, you guys need to get out. What? But we're going to get out. I mean, it was like that quick. So it was one thing after another. And then finally, the cousin I was talking to, he said, Lance, what's going on? What's going on? This is crazy. And
if you really get to the crux of it, I would assume that before they even attempted to censor and silence, which is commonplace, if they can't, they will attempt to purchase you first.
Well,
that's the go-to. It's been my experience.
When you say that, are you saying buy you to be quiet?
Yes, that's been my experience, and I've seen this in person on different levels. That the first go-to move is how much is it going to take to keep your mouth shut, because it's much easier for them to write the check than to expend the resources to shut you up.
Well, I would agree with that, and it's funny you say that. Well, it's not funny, but it's. I would concur with that. Dr. Greer said that finally he was approached by a military personnel in a private room at a private location that said, how much is it going to take to keep you quiet? And they offered him an extreme, obscene amount of money.
Yeah.
I mean, it was way, and it was obscene amount of money to keep you quiet. And he said he turned it down. And I was shocked because that money is really taxpayer money.
Well, that's why they don't care how much it is.
No,
because it's not theirs to start with, and it's much easier. Well, they have all this calculated out, okay? And I've seen this countless times with different things, not of this nature and magnitude, but smaller things, and dealing with the clientele that I deal with. When certain things happen between clients and the general public, for example, when certain things happen between individuals, how much is it going to cost not to go to authorities and make a big deal about this? I've seen it. I've seen the checks, the ink dry in front of my eyes. Immediately. I mean, that's the way this thing works.
Do most of the people take those checks?
I've never seen somebody turn one down yet.
Wow.
Never. Ever.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, when you have the option, because they lay out the whole option, the scenario.
Oh, they do?
Oh, of course. Well, if you take this money and go away, everything's going to be fine. You might get offered a government position. You might get offered a job in this particular company. Your life will be set as long as you can keep your tongue behind your teeth. If you choose the other route, we can make just as advantageous as we can make this for you. We can make it equally as harmful for you. That's the way this works. But that's usually the first option because it's the cheaper option.
Right.
When you think about how many man hours it takes to use one of their contractual obligations to silence you, when it comes to the grand scheme of things, it's cheaper to give you the money up front than it is to expend the resources down the road.
True.
It's easier for them financially, and it's easier for them logistically. So they just break out the checkbook. I've seen it too many times.
Well, that falls in line again with what Dr. Greer was saying and what I have heard. But unfortunately, I think the cat was let out of the bag too soon on this one, where he contacted me in day 3, and he was still in shock, and then he contacted me, and I instantly made it a show. There was no...
Well, don't be shocked if you write this book and you get a call saying, I'd like to buy every copy of your book, for example. Every copy with the exemption that you don't print anymore. I mean, but that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of phone call you may get.
Okay.
I mean, that would be my personal advice to you, or the things that possible scenarios that might play out.
Well, and I ask, and I'm not going to get too detailed, but I'll say that there's things that I've never heard anybody write a book about this yet, but there's things in there on how to detect them that the public could do, how to notice them.
Oh, that might get a bullet in your head.
Okay.
I mean, you want me to be real with you, right?
No, no, that's fine. Yeah, I want to. I want
Yeah,
you to be real.
that might get a small piece of grain of lead in your cranium.
Okay.
It's a possibility. Historically, when people put out things that they don't want seen,
Mm-hmm.
that's what happens to them.
Okay.
So you go throughout history, they get a lead injection.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, there's some
It's either that, or they make it so difficult for you to navigate through life that you throw up your hands,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd hate to see that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I hate to
I
see someone's life destroyed because that's what's going to happen.
okay. I mean, there's no I don't have any documents or anything like that that is kept in a vault or anything that's under top secret or anything like that. It's just
You don't have to have it.
yeah.
Just you knowing about it.
Yeah, I know quite a bit more than what I divulge on the shows.
Of course you do.
And for a number of reasons.
I'm trying to talk to you in roundabout issues and still get the point across.
Yeah.
Because if I told you things that I know about certain people, there's no doubt that there's no doubt that I'm extendable. I have no illusions to that fact.
Well, I appreciate your candidness for sure, because that's why. I mean, we're talking about the truth here. I mean, we're trying to inform people, and I know some people will be bold, will saying, "Oh, they can't do this or they can't do that," and I said, "Listen,
okay, they can't.
Listen, you don't know what you're contending with. This is the world is not the world you know. There's an entirely different world that operates physically behind the scenes, that is way, way, way behind the scenes, that is 10 steps ahead of you and behind you." And I said, so you really don't have rights that you and I see on the news, the constitutional rights and laws. They don't operate on that level. It's totally different.
We haven't had a constitution since 1871, to be quite honest with you. See, we used to be the United States for America. In 1871, we changed to the United States of America. It's a big corporation.
Mm.
Big George Carlin said it best. It's a big club and you ain't in it.
I could see him saying that too.
That's in a nutshell. That's the truth.
No, I used to think he was really far out there before, years ago when I was watching him. But now I look back and it's just wisdom, and it's I got into this not knowing a lot, just in experiences that my brothers and I had. And as we got into it, it's just the hole started out so big and it just started getting bigger and deeper. And I thought, this is a movie. This is a science fiction movie. Life is stranger than fiction. And
well, it's not even a hole, it's a pyramid.
Mm.
And guess who's at the bottom?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And I appreciate the candidness. I mean, I wanted to ask you that question. That wasn't a question I had planned to ask, but because of our conversation here. So I guess in trying to wrap this up a little bit, What would be some words of advice that you would give those people that are investigators that are new into this, those people have been doing it a little bit and dabble into it, those people that are seasoned investigators, and seasoned, it could be that they write occasionally about this or film. What advice would you give to those investigators about what you have experienced, seen, and all the that you've gleaned over time in this satanic, ritualistic Nephilim, just kind of wrapping everything up? What words of advice or wisdom would you give to these researchers?
When it comes to the satanic ritual abuse,
Yes, and just kind of everything. Just
well, the currency for these people is children. So if you have small children or children of any age, keep them close, monitor their social media. If you let them have it at all, make sure you know where and when and with whom they're going. Know who their friends are, and keep a sharp eye on them, because at any moment they could get got. That would be my advice for those who have young children. If you're in the wilderness and you run across what you would believe to be or exemplifies the signs of ritualistic sites, which they'll be pretty obvious, even to the untrained eye, that you'll know that something is amiss here. Leave out of the area right then. Don't pass go. Don't collect your $200, because typically they like to go back to the same areas, because what they do needs privacy. Performing some of these rituals, and some of it's done right in the middle of town and in buildings and lodges and things of that nature, which I'm not going to get into right now.
okay.
Leave. Always go armed. Even if not for the natural, typical wild animals, protect
Mm-hmm.
yourself. The real monster out there is men.
Mm.
And if a man will take and cut the heart out of an infant in front of you, what the hell do you think they're going to do to you?
Mm.
So they have no heart, no soul, no compassion. So be very mindful. That type of activity, I'd say you could report that to your local authorities. But then you run the risk of them being one of the people behind the robes.
Mm.
So, just one of those things. Keep yourself safe. Be situationally aware. It's one thing I teach to all my students, or used to be, to mind your surroundings.
Yes, that's what we talk about all the time. And, for us, the other thing that really is important for us is, be right with the Lord.
Well, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
Be right. Make sure you make yourself right with God.
Mm-hmm.
And approach it like that. Because ultimately he has all power and he is sovereign, and he will protect those that are his. He even protects the ignorant.
Good point.
Hoping that they'll come to the knowledge of the Lord Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all the advice I would give you in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, I want to chat a little bit more here, but I'm going to sign out with us here, and then I'm going to chat some more here, kind of off camera and everything.
Okay.
So we're going to end it here, and I really thank you so much for your advice, your information. It's uncomfortably eye-appealing. It's something that I know is not being talked about a lot out there with investigators, and that's why I wanted to call you, because, as investigators, people, some people just park and go off a couple hundred yards, and other people walk way deep in the woods and stay the night. and they go in very remote areas on wildlife management areas, and that's where these ritualistic areas can be, parks. And sometimes the most unlikely places can be these ritualistic sites. And so,
Well, I mean, I know for a fact that they have broken into churches
oh gosh,
and
really?
oh, yeah, and conducted ritual in Christian churches.
Jeez,
Oh yeah,
pretty
oh yeah,
bold.
yeah. It's their principle of inversion. See, they uh they do that to make a mockery
Hmm.
of the Lord.
Well, it's very interesting here that when I was treating a patient, his wife is a police officer in Tulsa, and I don't know what we started talking, how we got off on it, and I said, yeah, I like to, when it's late at night, I like to walk around my neighborhood because it's kind of lit up, and it's safe. We just walk around the circle. And he said, well, you don't want to go to a place, and he noted this well-known park. And there's a lot of people through the day that run there. You can bring your horse or you can ride a mountain bike. And I said, really? Why? And he goes, oh, he said, when my wife was on the force and now she's behind a desk. He said, but when she was working the night beat, they would go to this park because people from the highway would see lights coming through the trees. He said that they would come upon these cloaked people surrounding a fire,
Oh,
and
okay.
they were chanting. He said anyway, they would tell these people to take their cloaks off and they need some ID, and these were prominent people in Tulsa. Hey guys, I just wanted to follow up with this interview that I did with this minister. Um, I hope you got something out of it. I know it was a bit strange of a show, much different than I normally do, but it was important to me because now where I'm at in my journey of learning quite a bit more about these cryptids and where I relate, I think with what our guest had to say regarding his experience into this satanic world, I think in many ways it's like a spider web. It does connect to the cryptid world in many ways. And if many of you that are going to investigate into the woods, where do a lot of these satanic rituals occur? They can occur in towns and just outside of towns, right in plain sight, but some are in the woods. And if you come across some things that don't look right, that there are symbols that you're not sure of, or very grotesque things you're not aware of that people have hanging near a fire, or rings, or anything like that, or you come upon a group that just doesn't set well with you, and you need to leave these areas alone. You really do, and be careful. You need to watch yourself. So I know it sounds strange to say. I haven't heard anyone talking about this to my knowledge, at least in the cryptid community. There might be other YouTube sites, but they may not tie in the cryptid aspect. We did talk a little bit, as you know, as you heard, into the government, local government, state government, and more national government. If you really want to see some very eye-opening documentary, I guess you could say, an eye-opening documentary that kind of opened my eyes to the more that I got into these MIBs. And as you know, I'm currently writing some books, and I had to ask him about some of the research that I'm doing now into this agency. And I don't want to say an agency, but a program, I should say, because it's made up of a multitude of agencies. I feel it is a program, unacknowledged program by the government, by a multitude of agencies. So, but you know what I mean. So the show that really opened my eyes was The Belly of the Beast by the Fallon brothers, Fallen. They're Christian brothers, and when I saw The Belly of the Beast, they have a couple of good ones out there. Two shows. It really opened my eyes up quite a bit. And they mainly talk about DC, these alphabet, CIA, FBI, NSA, all these organizations on how they're tied in with some very, very evil things, and it's pretty damn scary. But that's how it ties in some ways. When I started doing some investigation work into this, even more so, and then now writing about it. So, in many ways, it's like a spider web. It all attaches here and there, and that's why I wanted to do this interview. You may not be interested in this, and that's okay, but I just wanted to kind of inform you. My job, the way I feel, is to help people cope, but it's to those of you that listen to the show, I want to inform you. And many of you, you already know this stuff. But this is kind of how I see it. So I wanted to at least inform you guys, that those that go out and investigate, those of you that do not investigate, just to kind of open your minds and your eyes to what's going on. Again, this guest was very informative. We're going to do a part 2, I guess you could say. This was kind of a lengthy interview, but a part 2 on some of the people that he has counseled and their encounters they've had with paranormal, cryptid related, which we didn't even really get into that because he's got years of this up to this point. His background's quite interesting, I thought, right? You know, the psych wards, protecting certain personnel, people of government, law enforcement, you know, people of wealth. And so he really sees this. I thought it was interesting when he said that these people that he was protecting, you could almost smell the evil on them, you know. And I think when you've got your, if you will, your spiritual radar on, you can sense these things a lot sooner and easier than most folks. I really do. I do believe that. And we got into a little bit of, you know, how can one do that? Or how can one sense when they're in the woods and they're not alone and all this? I just think when your sensitivity of your sensory, you know, your visual, your auditory, your kinesthetic, when all those are in tune and those are operating at a high level, it's about vibration. And we got into that a little bit, talking about vibration. Everything has an amplitude and an oscillation. And whether it's the light that you see reflecting off my face or the sound of my voice, everything is light, if you will. Everything has vibration. And it gets into quantum energy. And this is not anything out there by no means. These are just laws. These are about physics. And these are things that, you know, you need to talk about, and things vibrating at a higher level versus at a lower level. And things that are evil typically vibrate at a much lower frequency. So fear, anxiety, all these things vibrate at a much lower frequency. And this is just not my opinion. This has been studied and shown to be true and proven with very sensitive data, research equipment, etc. So anyway, I won't ramble on here. I'm just wanted to do kind of a follow-up, a summary follow-up to this interview. We're going to do another one with this Reverend. So I hope you guys, again, are doing well out there. I hope you learn lots. And until next time, this is Lance with Monster 911. Take care, everybody.